Today we delve into a truly peculiar story. Some might think it's a work of fiction or embellished with lies, but this story is grounded in reality without exaggeration. U.S. court cases confirm the reality of the story, along with testimonies from lawyers and substantial evidence. We'll explore all these details in this video. Our protagonist is a man named Futanga Babani Sissoko, originally from Mali. The events date back to 1995 when Sissoko went to Dubai, which had established itself as an important tourist and economic center in the region, attracting people from various countries and ethnicities to set up businesses and trade. However, upon arriving in Dubai with a business visa, Sissoko went to the Dubai Islamic Bank, one of the largest banks in the city. He went directly to the main branch and insisted on meeting with the bank manager, Mohammed Ayub. The employees were surprised. It's not common for someone to walk in and demand to see the bank manager immediately. Despite this, Sissoko persisted until he got a meeting with Ayub. When Ayub asked about the purpose of his visit, Sissoko requested a loan for a car. Normally, certain criteria are needed for a loan, such as having a job or a stable income, which Sissoko didn't have, especially as a newcomer to Dubai. However, somehow he convinced Ayub to grant him a car loan without any kind of collateral. Afterwards, Sissoko thanked Ayub and invited him to his apartment for dinner. Initially, Ayub was hesitant, but Sissoko insisted. To persuade Ayub to visit his apartment and accept the dinner invitation, Sissoko tempted him with the promise of showing him something extraordinary and unique from his culture, a marvel he had never seen before, assuring Ayub that he wouldn't regret it. Ayub's curiosity was piqued, especially in the 1990s when tales of magic and genies were more mystical than today, and people were more fascinated and believed in them. Finally, Ayub accepted the invitation. In the evening, Ayub arrived at Sissoko's apartment. Sissoko welcomed him, and after some initial conversation and hospitality, Sissoko led Ayub to a dark, smoke-filled room that seemed otherworldly, filled with various objects. There, Sissoko revealed that he was a sorcerer capable of using genies to duplicate any amount of money, meaning that if Ayub brought any amount, Sissoko claimed he could return double the sum. Ayub, listening attentively and observing the room, seemed to be drawn into this strange and curious world. To make a test, Ayub called a relative to bring 100,000 dirhams, or approximately $25,000. When the money arrived, the bank manager handed it to Sissoko, and they both entered the dark room that truly resembled a sorcerer's chamber. In the center of the room, Sissoko sat with the money in front of him, while the bank manager stood and watched. Suddenly, music began to play throughout the apartment. Sissoko threw a substance at the censers, causing the smoke and incense to increase significantly. He began chanting in strange tones, swaying his body from side to side. Then, unexpectedly, the electricity in the apartment went out, plunging everything into darkness. Moments later, a loud noise was heard coming from an adjacent room, and a door burst open. A man came running out, screaming about a genie that had appeared and attacked him. The bank manager was bewildered and didn't know what to do. Sissoko laughed and told him not to worry, explaining that such incidents were normal, but that the genie might feel uncomfortable with his presence as a stranger. He advised Ayub to leave the apartment for a while until the money duplication process was completed. The manager, now frightened and confused by what he had witnessed, obeyed and waited outside, hearing sounds of music and movement inside the apartment, and even thunder, lightning, and smoke seeping from under the door. After a while, the commotion inside the apartment calmed down, the noises ceased, and the door opened. Sissoko, standing in the doorway, invited the bank manager to enter again. The manager entered and found the apartment filled with smoke, but the first thing he noticed was the money on the table. Sissoko pointed to the cash and told the manager, "Here's your money doubled. You gave me 100,000 and now it's 200,000. The manager approached the table in disbelief, handling the money. Indeed, it seemed that the amount had doubled, 200,000 dirhams, precisely double what he had given to Sissoko. At this point, the bank manager, Mohammed Ayub, was completely convinced by Sissoko's act. Possibly with the help of an accomplice, he had made him firmly believe in sorcery, and he harbored no doubts. It's worth noting that this money duplication trick was a common scam in the 1990s, especially executed by individuals of African nationalities. Ayub fell into the trap, genuinely believing that Sissoko was a sorcerer who could duplicate money. This belief led him to start transferring substantial sums to Sissoko regularly. He opened a special account at the bank for Sissoko and continued transferring money to it. Here, the story takes an even more illogical turn. Despite transferring millions of the bank's funds to Sissoko, the money never came back doubled. Ayub simply continued making one transfer after another, all coming from the bank's money. In the period between 1995 and 1998, the bank manager carried out an astonishing 183 transfer operations to Sissoko's accounts. We're not just talking about his accounts in Dubai, but also those in various countries around the world, including the United States, Switzerland, and France. The total of these transfers reached the staggering sum of $242 million. One of the fundamental questions is why the bank manager continued making these transfers, millions after millions, even though Sissoko never duplicated any amount as promised, but simply continued receiving the millions for no apparent reason. There's no clear explanation for this behavior, only conjectures. Some speculate that Sissoko might have really been a sorcerer, not just a scammer, and used magic to cloud the bank manager's judgment, forcing him to continue the transfers. Another theory suggests that fear played a role. Perhaps the bank manager truly believed Sissoko was a sorcerer and feared doom for himself or his family if he disobeyed. A third possibility is that Sissoko might have had some kind of leverage or threat over the manager. When the bank manager first transferred a significant sum, probably in the millions, Sissoko might have refused to return the doubled amount and instead threatened to expose the manager if the transfers didn't continue. The second pressing question is how massive amounts were withdrawn from the bank for 3 years without anyone noticing or raising an alarm. Even if the bank manager was the highest authority in the bank, there must have been accountants, routine audits, and inventory processes. How could such a large sum of $242 million go unnoticed for 3 years? This aspect is perhaps the most perplexing part of the story. It's possible that banking operations at that time were different, or that accounting systems weren't as advanced as those we see today. We're talking about an incident that occurred about 30 years ago, but this explanation seems weak because regardless of the systems in place, the amount was extraordinarily large. Here begins the second chapter of the story, focusing on the luxurious life that Sissoko enjoyed using the bank's money. As mentioned earlier, the story began in 1995. After tricking the bank manager and securing millions, Sissoko decided to leave Dubai and return to his home country, Mali. During this time, the bank manager continued transferring millions to Sissoko's account. Sissoko spent several months in his native village of Dabia in Mali, which, like many villages in the region, was impoverished. He was giving away gifts and money to the villagers and initiating various projects. This generosity transformed the village's economy, and the villagers began to see him as a father figure and savior, affectionately calling him Baba Sissoko. He became a beloved and revered figure in the community. After several months in the village, Sissoko decided to move to the United States, specifically to New York. With bank transfers still ongoing, in early 1996, Sissoko arrived in New York and opened an account with Citibank, one of the largest American banks at the time. He visited the main branch in New York and somehow convinced one of the female employees to marry him, probably using his wealth as bait. Despite knowing that Sissoko already had multiple wives in Africa, Europe, and other parts of America, she agreed. This marriage to the Citibank employee was primarily aimed at facilitating his banking transactions, as he planned to transfer all his funds from Dubai to the United States. Indeed, Sissoko successfully transferred over $100 million from his account in Dubai to his account in the United States. His new wife, an employee at Citibank, probably facilitated these transactions. While Sissoko might not have needed her help, her involvement certainly smoothed the process. In return, he gifted her $500,000 and continued spending generously on her. To corroborate the transfer of this enormous sum from Dubai to Citibank in America, this page documents the case filed by Dubai Islamic Bank in 1999 against Citibank in the United States. It's a documented legal case that took place in New York courts between the two banks. The case details that from 1995 to 1998, with the help of 3 Citibank employees whose names appear in the court documents, one of them being Sissoko's wife, according to the case, they helped a man named Futanga Babani Sissoko in a money laundering operation. The records and court documents mention that the amount involved was $151 million. Returning to our story, feeling secure once the money arrived in his U.S. account, Sissoko began living a luxurious lifestyle in the United States. He started spending extravagantly, buying everything he desired. He even bought airplanes and established an airline called Daya Airlines, named after his village. He bought a small private plane and two Boeing 727s, each with a capacity of 180 passengers. He intended to create a full airline, but opted for used and older planes as new ones were prohibitively expensive, even for him. However, these ambitious plans didn't fully materialize. The planes mostly remained grounded at the airport, and the airline he dreamed of never really took off. This was characteristic of Sissoko. He would enthusiastically invest millions in new ideas only to lose interest later amid his grand projects and extravagant spending. Sissoko didn't forget his people. He continued supporting the inhabitants of his village, Dabia, and his popularity grew, extending even to neighboring areas. Every time his plane landed, people gathered to welcome him with flowers and hugs, and he generously shared his wealth with them. Sissoko lived like a king in every aspect, including his popularity and public admiration. However, things took a turn for the worse in July 1996. At that time, Sissoko attempted to buy two helicopters that belonged to the U.S. Army. These were old, deactivated military helicopters dating back to the Vietnam War era. Sissoko had set his eyes on them and submitted a purchase request to the U.S. government, stating that he wanted to convert these helicopters into air ambulances to transport the wounded. He planned to use them in his village, where he had already built hospitals and clinics, as an additional support tool for these medical facilities. However, the U.S. government halted the request due to suspicions that Sissoko might use the helicopters for other purposes, such as drug trafficking or arming them for use in civil conflicts in Mali, given their military origin. As a result, Sissoko's associates attempted to expedite the process through illegal means. Sissoko's followers tried to bribe a U.S. official with $30,000. Sissoko didn't do this directly. It was an initiative of his supporters. Unfortunately for them, the official they tried to bribe was honorable and reported the bribery attempt to the authorities, leading to their arrest. Investigations revealed their connection to Sissoko, making him a wanted man in the bribery case. However, Sissoko wasn't in the United States at that time, which led to an international arrest warrant through Interpol. Sissoko was eventually arrested in Geneva and was detained in one of the prisons there, waiting to be extradited to the United States. He immediately hired American lawyers to defend him, with Thomas Spencer as his lead attorney. Sissoko requested Spencer to meet him in the Swiss prison to discuss the case and subsequent legal proceedings. Spencer, recounting his visit to Geneva, mentioned an unusual interaction with the prison director before meeting with Sissoko. Spencer spoke with the director, who strangely requested to delay Sissoko's extradition as long as possible. Surprised, Spencer asked about the director's interest in the matter. The director revealed that Sissoko was arranging for exquisite meals to be brought from Paris every night, creating a rather pleasant situation for them. From the moment Thomas Spencer encountered the peculiar situation with the prison director in Geneva, he realized he was dealing with a unique and strange character. Shortly after, Sissoko was extradited to the United States to face charges related to the bribery case, specifically in Miami, Florida, where the bribery incident occurred. Spencer's first move was to request a bail hearing with the aim of securing Sissoko's release until the trial. However, the U.S. government and the prosecutor strongly opposed any bail, fearing that Sissoko might flee due to ongoing investigations into his activities, which they suspected involved more than just the bribery case. Despite these concerns, Sissoko gathered considerable support for his bail hearing. Possessing a fortune like Sissoko's, regardless of how it was acquired, allowed him to establish powerful connections with influential people. He leveraged these relationships to gain support at the bail hearing. His lawyer presented numerous diplomats and high-profile individuals from various embassies and positions who testified on his behalf. The judge even noted in the court record that he had never seen so many diplomats in a courtroom before. These testimonies portrayed Sissoko as a respected and prominent figure, strengthening his lawyer's argument that Sissoko was a man of stature in the community and unlikely to flee. Additionally, his legal team assured the court that Sissoko was willing to pay a substantial bail to guarantee his presence at the trial. The judge, feeling immense pressure, especially from the prosecutor and the government, who were vigorously against granting Sissoko bail, decided to set an extraordinarily high bail amount unprecedented in Florida courts. $20 million, dollars, an amount the judge believed prohibitive, assuming Sissoko couldn't pay it. However, after consulting with his defense team and understanding the situation, Sissoko surprised the court by agreeing to pay the bail. The bail was paid, and Sissoko was released. One of the first things he did after his release was to gift his lawyer and the defense team 7 cars. The lawyer and his assistants were stunned. It was the first time a client had given them such extravagant gifts, especially considering that Sissoko's trial was still pending. All they had achieved so far was to get him released on bail until his trial date. Sissoko was required to remain in Miami until his trial, but that wasn't a problem for him. During this period, he embarked on an unrestrained spending spree. His associates described how he would enter a jewelry store and make purchases worth $500,000 in a single visit. Car dealership employees also reported that he would buy 2 to 4 cars every week. Additionally, he married several women, possibly more than 10, just in Miami. He rented more than 20 apartments, each for a different wife. Meanwhile, the manager of Dubai Islamic Bank continued transferring money to him. Sissoko had credit cards from the bank with no spending limits, and any debt accumulated on these cards was canceled by the bank manager as if it had never existed. The question of why the bank manager continued doing this remains a mystery. Was he truly under a spell, threatened, or scared? It's an intriguing head-scratcher. While in Miami waiting for his trial, Sissoko didn't forget the importance of philanthropy in improving his public image and gaining people's sympathy and support, which he hoped would help him in the trial. He would go to the streets of Miami, visiting impoverished areas to donate to the poor and homeless, providing them with food and clothing. The media documented these acts of kindness to boost his image. On one occasion, Sissoko helped a school marching band that needed funds to travel to New York to participate in the Grand Thanksgiving Day Parade. He donated $300,000 to the band, much more than they needed for the trip. In gratitude, the band performed a special musical piece for him to express their appreciation. Sissoko was working on improving his image in Miami society, believing that would facilitate his upcoming trial. In March 1997, the trial for the bribery case related to the helicopter purchase began. His lawyers advised him to deny the charges, especially since the recorded conversation showed Sissoko instructing his men to expedite the acquisition of the helicopters without violating U.S. law. Contrary to his lawyers' advice, Sissoko confessed to the crime in court, taking full responsibility for the bribery case. His lawyers were perplexed by his decision, and his lead lawyer, Thomas Spencer, was even appalled. When Spencer tried to understand Sissoko's reasoning, he refused to explain it. Spencer felt something was wrong. Years later, it was discovered that Sissoko might have confessed to stop further U.S. investigations into his financial transactions, fearing more serious problems than the bribery case. Sissoko's sentence was not severe. He received only 43 days in jail and a $250,000 fine. Since the bribery case was not considered significant, as it only involved $30,000 and 2 out-of-service helicopters, it was not seen as a highly sensitive matter. Sissoko was sent to a federal prison in Florida, a regular facility not particularly high security. After serving about half of his sentence, the government offered him a deal to complete the rest under house arrest in exchange for a significant donation to a homeless shelter. Sissoko agreed and donated $1 million to the shelter. Consequently, he was released from prison to serve the rest of his sentence under house arrest in one of his homes. Once Sissoko completed his sentence, he immediately left the United States and returned to Mali, where he received a grand welcome at the airport as usual. In 1998, bank transfers from the director of the Islamic Bank of Dubai to Sissoko continued. Sissoko didn't save the money. Instead, he found ways to spend it, whether on projects like DEA Airlines or distributing it to his followers and those around him. He enjoyed playing the role of a modern Robin Hood. Even his lawyer noted that while waiting for his trial in Miami, Sissoko spent around $1 million monthly on gifts for people around him. This spending was intended to increase in Mali, where these people were his relatives, and it was much easier to be generous with someone else's money. At the same time, he constantly requested more transfers from the bank director, who kept complying, though it was unclear why. However, such an unusual situation was bound to come to light eventually. In March 1998, some bank accountants began noticing discrepancies and started asking questions. The bank director felt the heat, especially since he hadn't been able to contact Salko for some time. According to the story, the director decided to confide in a close colleague. He struggled with how to address the issue, unsure how to explain that he had transferred such massive amounts to an African man from another country because he believed he was a sorcerer or because he himself was under a spell. It was an incredible scenario. Embarrassed, the director couldn't summon the courage to verbalize the total amount transferred to the so-called African sorcerer. Instead, he wrote it down. 890 million dirhams, equivalent to $242 million. His colleague was understandably shocked, realizing that this could mean the end of the bank. Once the news began to spread, panic erupted among the bank's clients, fearing for their deposits. This could have led to a massive withdrawal of funds, exacerbating the bank's financial crisis. The Emir's government quickly intervened upon discovering the bank's financial problems. Dubai's own newspaper, Al Bayan, published an article assuring the public that the situation was under control. The Emir's government and the central bank guaranteed the safety of all deposits in the Islamic Bank of Dubai, crucial to preventing panic and mass withdrawals. The article also mentioned that an investigation was underway and that the director of the Islamic Bank of Dubai, Mohammed Ayoub, along with two of his associates, had been detained for embezzling funds ranging from 200 to 500 million dirhams. Most of the loss was borne by the bank's owners, since it was a private institution on the brink of collapse until the government's intervention. In exchange for this bailout, a significant part of the bank became government-owned. Details of the legal proceedings against the director and his associates are scarce, but according to the article, 17 people were sentenced to 3 years in prison. These defendants were of various nationalities, mostly bank employees, which partly explains how such sums could be embezzled. Whether these employees benefited from their complicity remains unknown. The article confirmed that the total amount embezzled by the bank director, Mohammed Ayoub, was over 890 million dirhams. As for Soko, he was also among the 17 convicted, receiving a verdict in absentia since he remained in Mali. All the defendants received only 3-year sentences. In 1999, the Islamic Bank of Dubai filed a lawsuit against Citibank in the United States, accusing it of accepting large transactions without proper procedures. The bank demanded $151 million in compensation, but it seems Citibank ended up not paying any damages. Lawyers appointed by the Islamic Bank of Dubai in the United States investigated the transfers to determine where the money went. They concluded that Mohammed Ayoub, the director of the Islamic Bank of Dubai, and his associates did not financially benefit from any of the transferred funds, all of which went to Soko. This perplexing situation brings us back to the question of why the bank director authorized all these transfers. As for Soko, Interpol issued an arrest warrant in his name, meaning he would likely be arrested if he traveled anywhere. Therefore, he remained in Mali, which has no extradition treaties with other countries. To protect himself even further, Soko became a diplomat. He ran for parliament in 2002, won the election due to his popularity, and became a member of the Malian parliament, thus acquiring diplomatic immunity. He believed this would protect him even if he traveled abroad. However, over the years, Soko's fortune dwindled due to his excessive spending, leading to a significant drop in his popularity. He lost the 2014 elections, his parliamentary seat, and his diplomatic immunity as well. Soko then returned to his small remote village of Deya and lived there for the rest of his life. In 2018, a BBC reporter managed to reach Dubai, found Soko's house, and convinced him to participate in an interview, the only one he gave. Unfortunately, Soko's interview was not very enlightening, and he did not answer the intriguing questions we had. Soko did not say much and did not provide clear details about the whole affair. The highlight of the interview was Soko's admission of having had a vast fortune at one point, claiming to have had a capital of $400 million at one time. However, he only embezzled $242 million from the bank. Where did the additional millions come from? There are two possibilities. Either Soko exaggerated his wealth or he was involved in other unknown frauds. Many lean towards the latter option, doubting that the Islamic Bank of Dubai fraud was his only operation. When asked about the current whereabouts of the money, Soko simply said he had spent it all. When the interviewer asked about the Islamic Bank of Dubai case, Soko evaded the topic, almost denying it, claiming that his only interaction with the bank was for a car loan. As for the $242 million and the use of magic, he took it as a joke, denying everything and stating that if he were a magician, he wouldn't need to rob a bank. He suggested that the bank should explain how such a huge amount disappeared from its accounts. The interviewer, being in Soko's house and among his people, did not press further or ask about the significant documented transfer at Citibank, the bank employee he married, his extravagant spending in Miami, or the countless other questions he could have asked but chose not to out of fear. In the interview, Soko made a revealing statement about his character, saying that one can never have enough money. Today you spend 10 million, tomorrow you want 20 million, and the day after 40 million. Money is insatiable. Soko remained free and unquestioned, living in his small village of Dea until he died in 2021. This brings us to the end of this extraordinary story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and check out other amazing videos. Thanks for watching.